The Center for Procurement Excellence is a nonprofit member organization with a mission of educating, promoting, and advocating for better RFP processes. Join CPE today and make your RFPs faster and more transparent. Membership also includes discounts to all of our training and networking events. CPE hosts a variety of virtual and in-person networking and training events throughout the year. Visit our website to get signed up. CPE Speakers Bureau is available for your regional and national meetings and professional conferences. Contact us to learn more.
Welcome to Ask the RFP Doctor, CPE's monthly web series where we discuss the latest best practices in procurement and supply chain management.
Okay, so let's go ahead and hit our teaching moments for the month on the pitfalls of IT software RFPs. Here is what we're going to do in terms of agenda. I'm going to quickly cover 7 of the most common pitfalls that we see when it comes specifically to information technology, mostly software related, although many of these mistakes and pitfalls are often made in a hardware setup as well. But they'll be most directly relevant to software RFPs. So we'll focus on that. We'll run through those 7 quickly. Number 2 is I want to share a separate study to put things in the context. So there's an interesting study that was done a handful of years ago on the dominant dozen early warning signs of IT project failure. So we'll run through that quickly and see how that relates to an RFP process. And we'll summarize things and move into our virtual peer groups from there. All right. So pitfalls, let's review 7 common ones that we see. Obviously, there are way more than just these, but 7 common pitfalls. Let me go ahead and get those started. So number 1 is that the statement of work itself that's contained within the RFP does not provide a consistent benchmark for suppliers to bid to. In other words, the pricing that we're getting back in response to our RFPs may not be apples to apples aligned across the competing vendor or supplier teams. And that makes it really difficult to compare pricing. This is an example that we've sometimes shared before, so you may have seen it from us. This is actually an ERP procurement that we were involved with. And in that case, there were 4, it's kind of a bummer of a case here. We had 4 vendor responses, all the usual suspects for the ERP systems. They came back and the actual quoted license numbers that came back from those 4 were anywhere from 0 to 2,200. The 0, of course, didn't really mean 0. They just said, hey, we'll give you a more specific quote after you pick us, one of those types of things. But then the fact that there was no consistency across the ranges here, it was all over the place, meant that we ended up having to throw out price at that point in time because it was all over the map. They were not directly comparable. That's the biggest challenge up front is we want a directly comparable price competition so we know who has the relative best value when it comes to the financial side of the evaluation. So that's number 1, is just knowing what the vendor community or supplier community needs to see in the statement of work that's going to primarily drive their pricing. And that could be different from software type to software type. And it can change over time. And part of the issue that happened on this particular RFP is the client was under the belief that it was specific users and types of users, your typical user, your power user, your admin user, and so on, that was going to drive pricing. And that's how they were defining the statement of work. But by that point in time, ERP systems had changed and they were going more to just a total employee counts, total user count rather than specific named users and things like that. So it had kind of changed on them since that client had last gone out to market. And that's common in IT. So number 1 is knowing what the pricing drivers are going to be for a particular software system. If you don't know what those are, or you want to double check it before you go to an official RFP or formal RFP, then upfront market research tools are a place that we could chat about more. Now, even if you do know the right way to go here, and I'll have to admit, on this ERP example that we were involved with, we actually did have the correct information in the statement of work, but the problem was the statement of work was so big and cumbersome that we didn't make it as easy for the suppliers to actually find that information, see it, and use it. So even if you do get the right benchmark set up in your statement of work within your RFP, You have to make sure it's communicated really clearly as well to make sure that folks don't overlook it. So we can talk about that further as well. So that's number one, is getting that consistent benchmark so you can compare prices apples to apples, or as close as reasonable across the participating suppliers. Number two, lacking definition in your overall project goals, your motivations, your success criteria. So why are we doing this project? Why are we soliciting for this type of software? And then what is a successful outcome for our organization specifically? What outcomes do we want to achieve? A reminder for folks here is this is one of the first things that we recommend at the Center for Procurement Excellence in your statement of work in the RFP. And we recommend putting this information right up front. Like the first part of your statement of work should be about a 1-page long, maybe 2 pages at absolute most, that describes first what the project is about. And think about this like a quick commercial or advertisement for the external supplier community. Here's a project, it's exactly what you provide, please come and propose. But then also describe why it is that we're doing this, what are our drivers, our motivations, and if possible, even quantify a few success criteria. What are the outcomes we're trying to accomplish? This becomes a North Star guiding light for our suppliers to explain, well, here's why, here's what we're trying to accomplish. So if we provide more of that why, then the vendors can come in with the answers of, well, here's what you need to achieve that outcome, and here's how to do it best. So that's number two. Number three, the statement of work, you got a consistent theme here. So 3 in a row for statements of work. But the statement of work area overlooks the importance of your current conditions. Those who have been a part of our trainings before will know that we're big advocates for publishing your statement of work, but also then going hand in hand with that is your current conditions, or maybe to put it in IT terms, your current state environments. So they go hand in hand. The nice thing about the current state is it's very easy to document. Oftentimes for IT projects, we get bogged down trying to picture the most perfect future state requirements and gather every line item that we want to have the system capable to do. But current conditions are the most commonly requested piece of information from suppliers. They want to know, why are you doing this project? That was the previous pitfall. And then number two, we also see them asking, well, what's the current state environment? What am I walking into? Is this a homegrown system? Is it custom developed? Is it all pencil and paper by hand right now? Am I replacing a legacy system? What does that look like to me as a vendor when I show up? What journey am I going on from point A to point B? So our future state and our statement of work is kind of like the point B of the project journey together, but we can't overlook the starting point here as well, and that's the current conditions. In IT, specifically software, we often see this type of a principle pop up of why clients can even justify not providing their current conditions more regularly than any other project type. And IT software will often avoid it as clients because we'll say things like this: I want an out-of-the-box solution that reflects best practices. I do not want to rip and replace what I currently have. So I'd rather not tell my vendors at all about my current condition, because then they're probably just going to mirror that back to me. And that's not what I want. That's why we're going out to RFP as a client, is we want something totally new and that's better. So I don't want to muddy the waters by communicating about what I currently have. That's going to distract from the point. Let's just go out there and put our future conditions, our requirements, and let's do that. We don't even want to confuse folks with the current state. That's how I often see a lot of client groups thinking. And then it becomes a clear justification in their mind of, let's skip current conditions. The supplier community, however, still wants to know. They're not going to be as surprised by the future state because they've already got their product. They know how it works. They're the experts in it, but they really want to know, how hard is it going to be to set up? Is it going to meet your needs and expectations? And all clients are a little bit different when they're walking in on that day one. And that really helps them understand, of course, their implementation, pricing, path, and journey. But then number two, it helps them communicate more clearly how their system or product is going to meet your needs. So those are the first 3 of 7. They're all statement of work related. The next several are going to be more related to our evaluation process when we're reviewing proposals and getting responses back from our vendor community or our supplier community. So number 4 is that sometimes we will see RFPs that go out for IT software, and they're going to completely focus on the product itself, which there's some logic to that, right? Which is, that's what's ultimately going to be left within our organization after the implementation period, after we go live, is we're going to be using this product. So that product better be darn good. But on the other hand, we cannot neglect the supplier team itself, particularly those who are going to lead the implementation and get us to that go live date. So for those who have attended our trainings before and may have done the car dealership workshop with us, where we give you different statements of work and you're looking at your inventory of cars, take that one step further of in IT, you're going to be procuring, in that case, in that analogy, the vehicle, the car, the products, but then we're also procuring a driver to help us get where we're going. We're procuring the software product and also the implementation services to get everything set up. So it's a both and type of approach. We can't focus on just one and overlook the other. So, I mean, if we go out and we get the coolest, spiffiest product in our car analogy, maybe a Formula One race car, but then we go out and the driver is like this, then we're going to be left lacking. It's not going to be the outcome that we are going for. And so we just can't overlook that. So even though, yes, IT software is highly product driven and oriented, the capability of that product to meet our needs and how it is configured and set up for us, and of course, on time, on budget, is largely driven by the people on the vendor's team who are going to lead that implementation. Cannot overlook that. Of course, some of you have been involved with the super large IT projects, ERPs, CMS systems, FM systems, and so on, where there's an entire separate company of a system integrator who's doing the work as well. And in that case, it exacerbates this importance as well. Number 5. Demonstrations. So software demonstrations. I can't think of a more, I don't know, nicer way to put it besides what I've written here, which is that they can become a razzle dazzle show of a lot of marketing promises. And I won't speak too much about this other than to tell you that in 2 months, our entire topic for the teaching moment will be about IT software demos. And that's a time when we'll share more about the range of demonstration options, what we would recommend, narrowing that range down to. And I think that we'll probably have some interesting stories when we get into our virtual peer groups about demonstrations that have gone wrong and demonstrations that have gone really, really well. And they certainly can go either way depending upon how we set them up in our RFPs. Number 6 of 7 here. One of the most common things that we see client organizations do is ask the suppliers to provide a line-by-line, literally line-by-line response to their requirements. And I'm going to have an overwhelming slide next. You don't have to read it all. What this is a big Excel file. You've probably seen something like this before, and it starts with requirement number 1. And in this case, it actually went down to 1,248 individual line items. It was massive. And then this was actually a response form given to the vendor community. What the vendors were asked to do is say, does their system meet this as part of their base system? Do they have to customize things for it, or is it more on their roadmap as a future development? And they went line by line for 1248. Okay, that's one thing. But where I've got the red flags really showing here is this column of description, comments. And in the RFP, in this case, the client asked the vendors to describe how their product met each of these items for 1,248 of them, right? It's brutal, and no one really wants to read it, and it takes forever. So even just going through and checking these line by lines of base custom roadmap is a bit of an ask for the vendor community, but then to ask them to describe every one, it's complete overkill. Now, if we're doing good demonstrations, we should be able to see the most important of these in the demonstration, verify that they're there, and not rely upon a big write-up that's going to slow things down. So that's a big challenge. The other thing I've got highlighted here is team member score. The initial plan in the evaluation process actually was for the evaluation team to score every single line item across the 1248. Of course, that they didn't end up doing that, but that's another mistake that can be seen. That'll slow down your vendor responses, and then if you go line by line scoring, that's another big slowdown for your evaluators. I think in short too, one thing that I'll mention as kind of a soapbox item for me personally is when it's kind of a catch-22 in IT software. We need to ask vendors to respond to something like this and tell us that, yes, we certify that our product meets your line item requirements, clients. So we do need that type of response. But then the temptation is to then take all their answers, right? So base functionality, customizable functionality, something that's more on their future development roadmap, and then give them different scores or different weights depending upon what that vendor says. Of course, we want to give more score, positive score to vendors who say that everything is in their base requirements rather than customizable or some future promise of a roadmap. Now, if we're doing that though, we have to be cognizant that if we're going to publish some scoring or weighting methodology there, we are actually incentivizing the industry to lie to us. Just flat out. We're asking them to lie. We're asking them to exaggerate. We're asking them to tell us as much as possible as base rather than customizable or configurable, whatever definitions we use. And it's never a good scenario to go into your RFP process where we've set it up that, yeah, the biggest fib teller or exaggerator is going to get the mostest of the points. And I have seen IT vendors just go and check yes down the column to everything. Then you get to the demo and you find out that they can't actually do that. Well, if we scored their yes to everything and can't change that score, now we're in a bit of trouble. Of course, there's a broader conversation that can be had there. And last but not least, number 7, just in general, this is worth mentioning as its own item. Your evaluation process for IT software needs to be very streamlined and not burdensome. If it's a lot of paperwork, your vendors will kind of look like this. And he's actually waving to us and he's saying bye. He's saying, I'm not even going to participate. This is way too much paperwork. So our IT vendors are super busy and they kind of just want to get in, do a demonstration, get you to sign the contract and go from there. That's the ideal sales scenario for them. And not responding to mountains of paperwork, writing big old proposals. They're used to demoing and building that relationship. So one of the things that we have seen across our work and something that our friends at Simplar have started doing is in IT, you have to minimize the paperwork as much as possible. We've even been going to some verbal approaches to market research rather than having vendors reply in writing. And we've also been going to some verbal approaches to proposal areas to basically get as much done verbally or over online and Zoom and recorded rather than written documentation, just to streamline things and make it as attractive as possible for the vendors to participate. So those are our 7 big pitfalls. Quickly, to wrap this up, I wanted to share the dominant dozen. What this is a study that was done now about 15 plus years ago, but it was a study by this group, Kappelman and others. And what they did is they had more than 50 what they called early warning signs of IT project failure. And they grouped them into 3 areas. There were people risks, there were process related risks, and technology risks. It was kind of the 3 areas that their 50 warning signs were grouped into. And then they went out and asked a whole bunch of IT professionals to start rank ordering them based upon prominence and based upon frequency and impact. I won't read this to you, but if you wanted it, it's in the slides. All 53 of the items or risk factors, early warning signs that they had tracked. But they narrowed it down. They found that there were 12 of the 53 that stood out head and shoulders above and beyond all of the others. And they called those the dominant dozen early warning signs of IT project failure. The top 12 were all people and process related items, nothing technology related. Absolutely nothing was technology related. It's all about the people and process. I've got them all listed out here on the slides. I won't read them all to you, but for their people related early warning signs, that's what the EWS stands for, early warning sign, and process related early warning signs. I highlighted them and related them back to the 7 pitfalls that we just covered. A lot of them are going to come back and tie into our RFP processes. So yes, this study was focused on the actual implementation and deployment of the technology, not purely the procurement process itself. But I would say the vast majority of this dominant dozen have some minor or even significant linkage back to the RFP process, primarily statements of work, attracting good vendor teams, being that client of choice to get the best competition, all factors in here. So I'll leave that more as reading on the side. If anyone would like the full study, by the way, it's a pretty short study. I'm happy to email it to you. Just shoot me a note. So in summary, IT projects absolutely are challenging both to deliver and of course to procure. They usually fail downstream due to people and process related risks. That's the study where that was showing us. And then our RFPs actually link into many of those dominant dozen early warning signs of failure, primarily due to statement of work, current condition related items, evaluation related items, and being that client of choice to attract the best vendor teams, or just not scare them away. So that would be our teaching moment for the day. Let me keep rolling here in the interest of time to open up our virtual peer groups. One other thing I'll let you know about is an opportunity before we do our peer groups. So an opportunity here is that we are looking for volunteers to do a human dimensions assessment. A number of you I see here have already signed up for this and sent an email, but basically what it is we're going to be sending out an assessment that covers personality, behavior, and emotional intelligence. Takes about 30 to 40 minutes to fill out all the questions, and you can stop and start it and self-paced and all that kind of stuff. And we're sending this to all procurement professionals who volunteer. It's completely free. So if you take the assessment, you will get your own personalized report. So you get all your scores back for those areas mentioned. And then what we're going to do is also give comparison to the average across the entire profession. So I think we've had about 80 people go through it, 70 or 80 people go through it so far. And then our latest batch of volunteers, of which many of you are included, we're going to get you that link out in the next couple of weeks so that you can get into the survey and go from there. But if anyone has not signed up for that, please go ahead, shoot me an email, and we're happy to get you enrolled. And we will be sending out the assessment, like I said, likely in the next couple of weeks for those who have already volunteered. So just a quick.
This has been Ask the RFP Doctor, brought to you by the Center for Procurement Excellence.